I want to welcome everyone here today for our conversations on the economics of affordable housing. My name is Andrew Lackman. I chair the Finance Advisory Committee for Culver City. We've been around for 10 years, and we serve as a body of community representatives, business owners, residents, people who work in various aspects of city government to advise the city and the city council on issues including budget, finance, taxation, bonds, that sort of thing. And we work with our wonderful controller, Lisa Sogor, who's also here tonight, amongst others, to provide that advice. I also want to thank Jesse Mays, Assistant City Manager, and John Nakbar for working with us to put together this wonderful event and this conversation. It very much falls into the challenging times that we're in as costs of housing have continued to go up, and the nature of the city has come under a lot of challenges. The question is, how do we create a livable future, and how do we get there? What are the paths to get there? There's a lot of ideas or preconceptions about what affordable housing is. I think hopefully tonight, with the expertise of Professor Stuart Gabriel from UCLA, we will have the opportunity to go through some of those and learn together what are the paths, what are the challenges we have, and hopefully at one point then we can even start to go into the questions about what are the best ways to get there once we have the frame in the future. But in order to build any house, you have to have a good foundation. It's an appropriate comparison here today. And so it's my pleasure to have Professor Stuart Gabriel here from UCLA, who has been a leader on so many of these issues. I can go into a very long introduction, but I think with such great expertise that we have here today, the best thing we can do is go right in and start building on those basics and understand what are the economics, how does this work, what are the challenges, and what does affordable housing really look like? Because, as I said, a lot of people have their own preconceptions one way or another. And this is a good way for us to come together and have a conversation about what those paths are. So with that, I will be very honored to hand it over to you, Professor Gabriel, to set the stage a little bit about affordability metrics and how we got to where we are.
Wonderful. Well, good evening, everybody. And Andrew, it's delightful to meet you, and I commend you on your civic service and all the things that you do for Culver City. And I wanted to thank Jesse Mays as well. And Jesse, as some of you may know, was a student in one of my classes at UCLA in the Anderson School of Management, and needless to say, a very outstanding student. And it was just so delightful, Jesse, to hear from you and to receive this invitation and to learn so much more about the depth of your leadership role here in Culver City. So I congratulate you on all of that. What we all kind of talked about in our little preparation for tonight was maybe I would set the stage by just reviewing a few metrics, so to speak, just a few details of the affordability challenge we have in front of us, and that may incent some of you to participate, to ask some questions, to get involved in the conversation. And then Andrew and I have a few things that maybe we'll discuss afterwards, just as a way of prompting some conversation. But the main thing for all of you who are in the room is that this is intended to be very interactive, and the more controversial your question, the better. And there's no question that's a bad question, and we've heard every question about this in the sense that people hold very strong views about construction of affordable units in their neighborhoods. So let's just bring it all forward and enjoy ourselves for whatever amount of time we've spent together. So please, I would say to the couple that's in the back of the room, you got to move up. If you were in my classroom, I'd say you got to move up. You can't sit in the back. But anyway, sit wherever you want. I think what I'm going to do, since it's a slide deck here, a very short one, is I'm just going to stand up if you'll permit me. And I guess the cue is to say next slide. So I'll say that, and we'll get going. But before I do that, just in this sort of introductory slide, the point I want to make is that affordability is a concern to us all. It's not, you would say, well, it's a concern to those primarily who are in desperate need of shelter and who are priced out of shelter. And I don't really call it housing, I call it shelter because it is what it is, it's shelter. And so yes, on the one hand, that's entirely correct. But it's also correct that it's pertinent to every single person here, every single person in LA. And why so? Well, it has metropolitan area ramifications that are broad, that are massive. I mean, jobs don't come to LA because of lack of affordable housing. Jobs leave LA because of lack of affordable housing. Population leaves LA. Population doesn't come. The economy gets hollowed out in different ways because of lack of affordable or middle class or whatever you want to call it, workforce housing, whatever. And this, so when you think about Culver City, one of the most salient points about Culver City, I think from a policy perspective, is that I honestly, I didn't know this until Jesse wrote me a very detailed memo that helped me. But you're a city of what, 5.5 square miles? Did I get that right? Mm-hmm. And about 40,000 people. And the whole idea about this city is that the borders are open. So you can't shut out what's going on outside of the city. You can't shut out the traffic that comes through the city on a daily basis. You can't shut out the homeless population that may be at your border. And so there are limitations to what I call the efficacy of policy that relate to the simple fact that you're a small island in a very open metropolitan area. And the analog to that is LA. Because you would think that, well, LA, it's a big, giant metro area. It's the second largest metro area in the United States. It's a global city, all of this. But similarly, LA today is getting arbitraged by all kinds of places in Texas and Arizona and Nevada and everywhere else, Pacific Northwest, because again, one way to think about a city is, well, it's its own deal and there are walls up around it, but just like Culver City, there's no walls up around LA. So when housing becomes too expensive in the metropolitan area, jobs flow out of LA. People flow out of LA. LA gets, so think about, one way to think about the United States is to think about what we in economics call a system of cities. So you have all these little nodes, a very large number of nodes all over the country, and they're constantly economically kind of interacting with each other. And part of that economic interaction is ripping off jobs or incenting populations to leave or whatever it happens to be. And that's all going to have profound effects. So the idea here, coming back to the point that I'm trying to make, is that lack of affordable housing is costing us all. It's costing us our tax base. It's costing us our property tax revenues, our sales tax revenues. It's costing us all kinds of things that we would potentially put to other sorts of uses. It's associated with the ongoing economic vitality of the LA metro area. So it's a problem that I think is really high up there in the list of problems that kind of need to be addressed as we think about a viable future. And just maybe to add one more point there, if you take the clock in LA back to like the 1970s, LA was like a big manufacturing hub. And if you looked around Southern California, there was automobile fabrication, there were all these blue-collar jobs, all these union jobs, all of that going on. Well, all of that's been hollowed out. And it's hollowed out because those jobs have not only gone to Kentucky and Tennessee and Georgia and places like that, but they've gone to Mexico, and they've gone from Mexico to China or to Vietnam or wherever it happens to be. And so we have a very different situation in LA today, where we have a class of people that are very well here in Culver City, that are part of all of the brilliant industries through your kind of brilliant policy that you've brought to the city and are sticking in the city, and you have office buildings that are relatively full here, unlike the rest of the world, and those sorts of things. But it's it's difficult because the whole economic base has changed. Blue collar in many respects has left LA, and that's created a lot of inequality. And so you have high end and you have very low end. And the low end services the high end, but the low end is in a very, very precarious situation with respect to economic viability, with respect to housing. It makes for long commutes, it makes for congestion, it makes for density, it makes for all kinds of exposures at the low end, because if you want a cheap apartment in LA, find one within about 10 feet of the Santa Monica freeway, because that's where some of those apartments are going to be. So the kids growing up in these apartments are exposed to toxins and have high rates of health issues and all the rest. So it's very complicated, the inequalities and inequities that have evolved as the economic base has changed and the housing affordability has evolved. But we can well, just don't let me talk. I have this occupational hazard that Jesse knows that, I talk in these 180-minute time slots, and that's really, really bad.
Well, so before we go into the slides here, I also want to recognize Councilman Dan O'Brien, who's also with us today. And we appreciate the support for the council as well. Do we want to pull up the slideshow there?
Yeah, I was just kind of riffing there for a minute. Okay, so let's pull it up. Or go on. I'll just run through these slides really quickly. They're just intended to get people into the ballpark, so to speak, to the extent that you're not there. But probably most of you are. So this shows a share of households that are rent burdened by metropolitan area in the United States. Mm-hmm. And by rent burdened, we mean these are households that pay more than 30% of their income in rent. These are renter households. And as you can see here, the unfortunate situation is that LA is an outlier. And of course, I don't have specific data for Culver City in the slides that I'm going to present, nor would that necessarily even be correct, because these are metro area issues. But anyway, you can see here, firstly, almost 60% of renters in LA pay more than 30% of their income in rent. But that's just kind of the beginning of the story, so let's go to the next slide. This is a really neat little interactive slide where it divides. This comes from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, and it divides the entirety of continental United States, plus Alaska, Hawaii, et cetera, into counties. And you can see the county boundaries. And then it color codes. And what I plugged into this slide is what's not called cost burden, which I just talked about, which are renters that pay more than 30% of their income in rent. But now we're talking about severely cost burdened. These are renters that pay more than 50% of their income in rent. And you can imagine if you're paying more than 50% of your income in rent, you don't have a lot left for much of anything else. And there's ample studies that show that people that are paying these kind of rent burdens are not, they're making choices between rent and food and prescription drugs and really critical items. So you can see here via the color coding that up to 30%, and you see LA County there in the dark red. Everybody see that? And you see San Diego County as well. A few counties around Miami, the New York metro area, where 30% of households, 30% of renters rather, pay in excess of 50% of their income in rent. So this is just an indicator of the fact that this isn't just an idle situation here in LA. LA is, unfortunately, what I call a national leader in lack of affordable housing. The LA, kind of Southern California, but certainly LA and the San Francisco Bay Area are just really trouble spots. And in fact, all of coastal California, really up and down the coast, from San Diego all the way up, is extremely cost burdened. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Most of those are urban areas, but it looks like you've got Crescent City.
Yeah.
Northern California. What's going on there?
I thought that the weed industry was going on there, and that was part of the economic development. And the reason I know that it was that I was up in the Redwoods over the summer doing some hiking in Humboldt County. And we met a bunch of people, and we said, oh, well, what do you do? And they said, well, we're in the wheat industry. And it was like everybody we met was in the wheat industry. But basically, you can have lack of affordability either because incomes are low, or because house prices are high, or rents are high, or some combination of both. So you're going to have different reasons for lack of affordability in different places. Like I have another slide that I didn't bring with me that shows a bunch of rural areas in the United States where there are actually affordability problems. And in those rural areas, it's not so much that rents are through the roof, it's that all the union jobs have left and they've been replaced by Walmart jobs. So you have people that were earning $70,000 a year that are today earning $30,000 a year. And so it's the income adjustments that are contributing to the affordability. I think that's what's going on in that far left-hand corner of California.
And if I may there, we have question sheets up there. So if you have questions, we'd love to have those in writing too, just for the continuity and making sure that we're staying on schedule.
Is it okay though if I...
We'll have one more question and then anything else. Yeah.
I was going to say that noting the previous slide, and I'm well aware of the exodus to places like Texas, yet there's cities, I think, on this chart that are in Texas, right? There's Austin, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Dallas. So, like, they have a pretty high penetration in this list that you don't want to be on. And yet, when I look at the next chart, the map, it's like it's far less dark than where we are.
Yeah. So, but you can see in Texas, and you probably know
Austin.
Texas. Is that Austin?
Yeah.
The dark red there. Yeah. Oh, that's Dallas-Fort Worth.
But Dallas was a little bit further up there. You may be right.
Okay, I'm obviously not the Texas expert, but yeah, there's, we talk about cities or we talk about states, but I mean, even within California, the situation between the coast and the interior is so greatly different, and the reasons for affordability challenges are so different in these areas. And, you can explain the last 30 years of LA history in terms of, or 50 years in terms of, the populating of the Inland Empire and all the rest of it is a big part of that story, of course, is people moving out to where land rents are low and where housing's affordable. So commutes and everything come after that. But let's go to the next slide. So, at its extreme simplicity, the way to address affordable housing is to build more housing, okay? Because supply and demand, and the more supply you have, the more you take pressure off of price. Now, housing markets are segmented, so if you build a bunch of luxury housing, that's not, say we build luxury rental in Culver City or something like that. The luxury rental is not going to take the pressure off the low end of the market because there is a theory for that in housing economics. It's called filtering, where the high-end units over time filter down to lower income population, but over time means 30 or 50 years. So we're going to ignore that theory. It's not a very relevant theory. And so the basic bottom line, the story for all of California, all of coastal California, is we need to build more housing. And we need to build more moderate income housing and low income housing and everything else. But if you look at this chart, take a look at the mid-1980s. We were building, so one line is single family, the other line's multifamily. If you add the two lines together, we were producing like 300,000 units a year in the mid-1980s. We had that big spurt of single family right before the financial crisis. But today, the total of single and multi is about 120,000. So we're building maybe a third, I'm rounding obviously, of what we built in the mid-1980s. And you can see that we were building very, very low numbers of both singles and multis coming out of the financial crisis. So it's been hugely challenging to get housing entitled and built in many parts of California. And you may know that California has been a national conceptual and legal leader in regulatory constraint on housing development. And that constraint goes back to the 1970s, a decision of the California Supreme Court that related to the imposition of the first growth management plan in the city of Petaluma, where Petaluma contended that they had the right to limit the number and the type of units that were being built within their jurisdiction. The Supreme Court upheld that right, and from there on, growth management proliferated in higher income and suburban and all kinds of communities in the state of California. And we're left with a situation where you have a very large number of communities in the state that not only don't want affordable housing, they don't want any housing. They want basically status quo. And this lack of construction obviously contributes to pressure on house prices and pressure on rents. Now, I'm going to show you in a slide in a moment that talks about how we're working on that, because what this kind of comes down to in a way is jurisdictional power at the local level to define what happens within the boundaries of that jurisdiction relative to the powers of the state of California. And for the longest time, the state of California was absent from the conversation. In other words, localities, do whatever you want. And recently, where recently means the last 5 or 10 years, the state has been playing a more active role in seeking to incent housing construction and affordable housing construction. But let's keep going. Am I going too long, Andrew? Next slide, please. So this is a complicated slide. I'll try to get through it quickly. It comes from the California Housing Needs Report 2023, the California Housing Partnership, where it talks about the state as a whole on the left-hand side, it talks about parts of the state on the right-hand side, so you see Southern California second from right, and it talks about annual production goals and share of annual production goal that comes from publicly funded housing. So the question is, can we use public subsidy to create the magnitude of affordable housing that we need to get us out of this situation? And to cut to the punchline, the answer is no. But just in trying to begin to answer that question, so California, 2019, about 7,800 publicly funded units were brought into the market. Publicly funded means that they used provisions like the low-income housing tax credit or other such public funding mechanisms to subsidize the development of affordable units. And we can talk more about that later. So that wasn't a very good number, 7,700 or 6% of California production goals. And the good news here, and there is good news, is that by 2022, 24,000 units were coming onto the market through public funding. That represented 20% of our regional, of our state level production goals. And just for the sake of Southern California here, where this is, I think Southern California is defined by the Southern California Association of Governments, so it's the multi-county LA CMSA or whatever. Here, homes funded publicly, Southern California about 9,400, and we're a regional goal of about 65,000, so far off. So the question that I asked a moment ago was, can we solve this problem through public subsidy, through public funding of affordable production? And I answered that question directly, and I said that the answer is no. And the reason I said the answer is no is that there is not adequate funding around to get us anywhere close to where we need to go. So the primary instrument, and Andrew and I are going to talk about this in a minute, the primary instrument for production of affordable units with public subsidy is called the low-income housing tax credit. And that's where corporations will put some equity dollars into the capital stack of an affordable development, and in return they'll get a tax credit. They'll use that tax credit in a way that's highly beneficial to them. Those tax credits are allocated by the federal government on the basis of population size. So we get a lot because we have a lot of population in California. But we use every penny of those tax credits and we still don't get close. So I teach sometimes, like we have in the center that I direct at UCLA, we have the only academically run program to train people to develop affordable housing in the country. It's an endowed program. It's called the Affordable Housing Development Program. We're about to kick off next week. We do it once a year. It's not a degree program. It's an open and executive program, et cetera. And a lot of the people that come to the program are very strong housing activists and in some senses very doctrinaire. And so what doctrinaire means is that they don't like the private sector at all. And the private sector is evil, and we don't want to interact with the private sector. I'm not trying to talk too much politics here. I'm trying to make an economics point. The economics point is that when it comes to solving the affordable housing problem in this city or this metropolitan area or this state or whatever, we need all hands on deck. In other words, we need to incent housing development wherever we can find it, however we can find it. I'm not in the least bit negative to public funding. I'm positive about public funding. I'm just saying that we don't have the dollars to get ourselves out of this problem through public funding.
It's not a cure-all, yeah.
I know I'm not the best, but is it basically true that it's not an issue of lack of housing? You know, you see all the apartments going up on Arden and all around us. Those buildings are part of the it's the lack of affordable housing.
I think it's both. I don't think our population growth far outpaces the number of units that are being built total. And we're very constrained in LA with respect to land availability for new construction. We're very constrained by regulatory processes. We can talk about that later. But we especially need affordable units, but one way that we get affordable units is what's called mixed income development. And that means if we get enough of this mixed income development, we might, we put X number of units of affordable in each one of those buildings, and slowly it might aggregate into something. But anyway, the bottom line on all of this is that, let's go to the next slide, and I'll talk about it in the context of the next slide. So this RHNA, I don't know how many of you have heard of that, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Okay, so everybody's heard of it. But you know that that's an effort, as I was saying earlier, by the state of California to insert itself into local production. For the longest time, the state would produce, these are regional housing needs goals for each locality in the state of California. You in Culver City have your own RHNA number between 2021 and 2029. Jesse sent it to me. It's about 3,300 units. Okay? Say it again? 3,341.
There you go.
You can see for LA, the number for LA is 450,000. For the longest time, the state would put out numbers, local government would ignore it, no one would talk about it, and that'd be the end of the story. Lately, it's a little different because the state has become much more serious about adherence to these numbers and achievement of these numbers. You can see here that the state wants LA to create between 2021 and 2029 450,000 units. LA in the prior decade, wasn't a great decade, but in the prior decade created 83,000 units. So right there's a massive jump. And then if you do the math, if you take 450 and divide it by 9 years, that gives you 50,000 units a year that are supposed to come online in LA. It's never going to happen. Never going to get close to that. So if you go down and talk to the mayor's office in the city of LA, they don't make any pretense. I mean, they're trying to bring units online really, really hard, but and the numbers are improving. We're not completely failing, but still, these are our big goals in terms of production. Next slide. What this means, again, California Housing Partnership is that, and this is apropos your question, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, Jamie, is that we have these categories of very low income and extremely low income. They come from HUD, and they have to do with households that are very low income is 50% of area median, and extremely low income is 30%. So these are very low income households. And you can see that we're at a massive deficit in the state of California of like 1.3 million units of housing for these populations. And again, you could call it housing, but I like to call it shelter. Because when you're talking about extremely low income, you know, it's that or a camper van on Venice Boulevard that doesn't move, or the street. And, you know, it's not as if we can talk about these affordability problems without confronting issues of people that spill down through a usual cycle and into the egregious, disturbing homelessness situation that we face currently. Okay, next slide. So now, part of a pathway to get to the lack of affordability, the red line is changes in rent over the course of the years since 2000, indexed to the year 2000 in percent. And the gray line is our changes in income. So we have median rent and renter median income. And so what you can see is not only are the changes in rent substantial over the period since 2008. By the way, what this chart doesn't show is that the changes in rent have come down a lot in the last year or two. Doesn't mean they're negative. Rents aren't necessarily falling, but the rate of increase in rents has come down to earth. It's come down to maybe the 5% level.
So you're saying a lot of that's COVID.
Yeah, so some of it is that, but you can see that this interest starting COVID. I mean, you see the gaps emerging even at the time of the financial crisis back in 2008, and it's the cumulative effect of rents exceeding income over all these years that have made for these glaring disparities between rents and income that we face today. So yeah, and by the way, if you've been bothered by news about an elevated U.S. CPI and the fact that the Fed's been tightening monetary policy, you know, time after time after time in an effort to bring down aggregate demand and bring down the rate of price increase, a lot of the basis of that price increase in the CPI is a sub-index of the CPI called residential rents, which reflects what I'm talking about right here. So this is, again, an artifact of housing scarcity, inadequate new construction, the fact that landlords, you know, are able to raise rents consistent with market demand, and the fact that renter population has not fared nearly as well. So last slide, homelessness in LA, and this just goes through 2020, but you can see here we have sheltered and unsheltered, and you know our numbers are truly disturbing, truly off the charts awful, and the fact that you know we're just trying so hard, but it's hard to make progress. And you guys, you know, here in Culver City, you're all aware, as we all are, of the efforts of Karen Bass to clean up homeless camps and get people off the streets and get them into temporary housing and then into permanent supportive housing and all the rest. And she's trying so hard, and it's just such a difficult, nasty, complicated problem. But you know, the homeless just keep coming. And again, to come to where I started here, you know, imagine a situation where Culver City was doing everything right with respect to homelessness. Mm-hmm. Well, given your open borders, there's no way of controlling the influx of homeless population into the city. So it's very, very, this is not about anybody. Mm-hmm. It's just about a structural artifact of the situation, a very small island in a very large metro area with open borders. And we study this in international economics because you can have a small country with open borders and it's the same story. If you're Luxembourg or somebody else, you just, in the context of the EU. So here is just a whole different story.
Well, this actually is a good segue in two things. So first of all, I think defining what affordable housing is important. And then also, since you talked about the homeless, I know it was sort of one of the last discussions, but I think there's been a lot of discussion about housing first versus the wraparound services. And once you get through the definitions, just sort of explaining, what is proven so far to be the most effective. Because here in Culver City, we have, especially in the last couple of months, taken some exceptional steps to make sure that we have supportive housing being built with supportive services in a number of places, and as well as the camp that we have set up as well for where people can have a place to sleep who need it as well. But what are the kinds of affordable housing that are out there? What is the tiers, if you will?
Well, let me, if you don't mind, Andrew, take the first part of that, which has to do with affordable housing or just housing the homeless. Would you mind if I spoke about that for a moment?
Not at all.
Okay, so the first confession I should make is that I'm a product of Berkeley in the 70s. And so you can take that for whatever it's worth, but I was there for a long time. I was there for 10 years. And in the 70s, Ronald Reagan, as governor, deinstitutionalized the state mental health hospitals because he felt that it was, look, there were a lot of motivations, but the what was presented as being the rationale, okay, yeah, I hear you. But the rationale was that it would be more therapeutic to put mentally ill into community-based care. And so the mental hospitals were disbanded. You all remember the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, California State Mental Hospitals. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's like, you got to go see it. But anyway, there was no community-based care that was ever funded or created. So all of a sudden, the population of California mental hospitals spilled over onto the streets of California, and the first round of homeless population in California was a severely mentally disabled group. Fast forward all the way to about 3 or 4 months ago, and to a new report that came out of UCSF on homelessness in California, where they say that actually the number one cause of homelessness today is not mental illness per se, but it's economics. It's housing economics. It's all the things we were talking about earlier. So how's that relate to the question that Andrew just asked? Most experts in homelessness, and I'm not one of them, argue that to be effective in housing the homeless, you need not just the housing part, but all the wraparound services. And that without the wraparound services, you're basically going to get nowhere in any kind of an effective or therapeutic management of the situation. So that these situations come with different names. Sometimes it's called permanent supportive housing, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think the takeaway, if this isn't too macro, is that the services that are provided to the homeless look very different than just kind of your standard lower income housing projects, workforce housing, or whatever.
So, per housing metrics, I mean, how did we get here? Why is LA so expensive as housing, and why particularly on the west side has it gotten, it feels like in the west side in particular, it's gotten much more pronounced and much more, the disparities have gotten much greater.
Yeah. So the answer, of course, has to be multifaceted, but take the following thought and play with it a little bit. The value of a home is the sum of two parts. One part's the value of the land. The other part is the value of the brick and mortar on the top of that land, which is sometimes called the improvements. Okay? The brick and mortar the brick and mortar is fairly uniform in cost and across geographies. An example of that is to take a public home builder like KB Home. And KB Home produces the same home, stamps it out all over the Southwest. Exact same home, same model, same dimensions, same features, same upgrades, whatever. All these homes are priced differently. They're all priced differently, not because the materials cost KB different amounts, but because the land costs vary. And the land costs vary radically. Why is land on the west side so expensive? The answer to that, there's a lot of pieces of the answer, but if you take historical California over the last 50 to 100 years, we have natural amenities. And those natural amenities are capitalized into the value of the land. So if you like the California weather, if you like the California sunshine, if you like the access to the beach, you know that land is always going to be more expensive the closer you are to the ocean, that kind of thing. So one thing is natural amenities. The other thing is that LA, for the most part, and we're very late to the game, has failed in terms of transportation infrastructure development. So one of the things about transportation infrastructure is that it creates access. And it can create access from low-cost land to jobs that are in high-cost areas. But in LA, our transportation infrastructure has been abysmal up until maybe recently, maybe still is. It certainly doesn't compare with many of the East Coast cities or even with San Francisco. And for that matter, the commute costs in time and money of getting to work in the city from Palmdale, Lancaster, Inland Empire, you name it, are egregious. They're egregious in all respects. So the access of the West Side is capitalized into the value of land. So the amenities are in the land, the access is in the land, and access means access to all the things you enjoy doing. It means access to jobs. It means lots of stuff. And then there's been a lot of constraint on development in the basin. The basin is mostly built out, and because it's mostly built out, there's very little land around. And all of those features, and I've probably missed a bunch of them, Andrew, add up to very expensive land. And that expensive land turns into not only expensive housing, but you have to ask yourself a question, which I know you all ask yourself working in various ancillary fields all day, every day, which is, how do you build cheap housing on expensive land? And basically the answer to that question in many cases is that you don't. Because from a private sector perspective, you can't get you need high rents to offset the high land acquisition costs. It's not just that, so many people so often, and I'm not here to defend or chastise developers. That's really not where I'm at all. But it's in my opinion, not proper to say, well, developers are just a bunch of greedy people that if we have a system of capitalism in this country, and if there's a buck to be made somewhere, someone's going to go make that buck. So it's not just that developers need 30% profit margins to come build housing somewhere. It's that it's very difficult to locate land. It's very difficult to acquire land. Land is very expensive. And when you do acquire that land, you have to create a plan for that land, a development plan that justifies those expenses and gives some kind of return. So where are we? I'm lost.
Yeah. So I think the other part of it is that a lot of the jobs here that have been coming in have been very high paying. And so while our population has in some ways, has continued to increase, the people who are coming in can afford to buy more expensive housing, and the people who are already there who weren't in those particular businesses and may not be able to keep up economically have been, you wouldn't want to say the loser, but they've been on the wrong end of this particular trend, putting affordable housing out of their reach as well, especially if they're young families trying to move up, and they may have had the starter home, but moving into the next level, or a condominium, but moving into the next level can be extremely difficult when you're competing with people who are making 2 to 3 times what you're making, who are able to outbid you for those homes.
100%. And it goes back to a point that I made earlier about the structural changes in the LA economy over time, and the fact that the, blue collar, union, et cetera, was hollowed out in many ways. And we're left with an economy where we have a lot of high-end stuff going on in finance and entertainment and all of the activities that have come into Culver City and that sort of thing. And then you have service workers that are really in a troubled situation.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm curious your thoughts on, probably rightfully so, the Governor Brown pulled away the RDA's, the redevelopment agency model, which in concept was partially meant to produce affordable housing and wasn't fulfilled. That something like that model today with the new sensibility that there is affordable housing. Do you know from your seat whether there is any momentum in creating something akin to that? And I know in Culver City that there's I can think of a half dozen large land where 50% blacktop. Story.
So if I may, just because people in the audience, people watching won't be able to hear the question, so I'm just going to re-say it. You can do the question as well, but he's asking about, they got rid of the redevelopment agencies under Jerry Brown, but there's still an urgency. The urgency is greater than ever for the need of that kind of funding in order to build affordable housing. And we have a number of large tracts which are mostly parking, which could be very good candidates for this.
I guess the question is, do you see more possibility towards creating another agency or another mechanism that allows for that again?
So is there another agency that could be created? I know Cindy Kamliger, before she moved on to Congress, had, I believe, a bill that was trying to push back in that direction of allowing cities to establish funds in order to pay for affordable housing and things, but I'm not sure where that left off.
Yeah. I am not knowledgeable of significant or material momentum in that direction, although the decision by Jerry Brown was broadly criticized. And the sense at the time, as you're well aware, was that it did a lot of damage to this particular cause. And one of the things that I was going to talk about in a little while has to do with the institutional capacities of cities to process affordable housing proposals and to be helpful in that regard. And Andrew, I don't know if we should talk about it now or not, but I just did a big study for the city of LA, and with respect to the approvals process in the city, which, just to summarize, appears to be almost completely broken. And so you have this odd, ironic situation where you have a mayor who and her deputies who are desperate to pull new affordable units out of the ground to get those units entitled and built, and yet you have a city bureaucracy which I'm not necessarily saying intentionally, is so caught up in their own thing that we estimated, we didn't do a focus group in our study. We didn't talk to 5 developers. We pulled databases out of the city of LA for the first time and out of DWP for the first time, where we could look. We looked at every single multifamily project permitted by the city of LA since 2010. So this wasn't even a sample of projects. It was what we call the universe of projects. And we ran data on timeframes that are related to approvals and entitlements and permits and such thing. And we found that the typical between 2010 and 2017, 22. The typical multifamily project in the city of LA took 5 years from first permit to certificate of occupancy. Just 5 years to get a unit online. Cost about $500,000. Cost, not price, cost. And out of those 5 years, maybe 2 years was the approval process. And then we were able to identify what pieces of the approval process were broken. And we did that so that Karen Bass and her colleagues now can formulate policy where they can say, well, if it's under 200 units as an affordable project, just make it by right. In other words, just let it go. Or we identified that if you have a multifamily project that needs an EIR, an environmental impact report, that EIR on average takes 4 years. But as I think you've correctly done in Culver City and has been done in other localities in California, including San Diego and Sacramento, you can take transit-oriented communities and you can do an EIR for the entire community and make it, it's like a blanket EIR. And then a developer comes, they want to put in that multifamily housing under the umbrella, and no EIR, no 4 years. So people are coming up with innovative ways of dealing with some of this, but we're just running a lot of scenarios for Karen and briefing her and everything else. As I think our report is not polemic, it's not partisan, it's not political. It's just running data. We just let the data speak for itself.
Right, and this was, I mean, we can also talk a little bit about the cost of the permitting process as well as how that can impact. Yeah, I've never understood in some cities that are charging fees to affordable housing developers for the money's supposed to go for affordable housing, so they're running up the cost of affordable housing by charging fees to the developers who are supposed to be incentivized by getting into this.
Well, again, this is where things get a little bit lost in translation between the directives of leadership of a city, city council, mayor, et cetera, and those who are at some other rung sort of implementing. And the whole story about fees, and again, this goes back to Berkeley in the 70s, because I ended up writing a PhD dissertation on this topic, but fees and exactions for local development didn't exist before Prop 13. Or if they existed, they were like $2 or $5 or something like that. Prop 13 halved property tax revenue to cities on average, and cities went looking for revenue. And they found revenue in development fees. And I did a survey, you know, obviously I'm old, but I did a survey in 1978 when I was writing my PhD, when I went to all the jurisdictions in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I asked them to tell me about their fees and exactions on development pre and post Prop 13. And then I obviously correlated all that information and showed how it impacted house prices. The fees all jumped like this. And we're still left with some of that.
And that's actually a good segue over to what are the mechanisms for funding affordable housing and for financing mechanisms. Because I know we talked a little bit earlier that the amount of resources available and it's just that public funding itself can't do it. Right. It's just too much of a drop in the bucket.
Well, we have so there's this whole potpourri of things that we do with bond finance, and we do a tax-exempt bond finance, or we do it with creation of conservancy funds, or all sorts of things for purposes of funding low-income housing, affordable housing. None of those things are bad. The question that I put before you, and Andrew, is whether they're material to a solution, whether they're salient to the problem. And the only kind of public device that's truly salient is the low-income housing tax credit. Back in the day when we weren't shutting down government or voting on defense bills because of internecine warfare in one political party, and I better stop right there because I've already gone way too far. This thing was is just kind of unimaginable. Anyway, we have this LIHTC. This LIHTC comes from the federal government, and the LIHTC is funded. We don't have the tools we had earlier that are, for example, we used to build public housing. And honestly, there's a reason to think about whether there should be such a thing as funding of public housing in today's world. Now, that's an economic statement. It's a statement about the problem we're facing. It's not a statement about the political feasibility, because public housing has a terrible reputation, has failed on many dimensions, and hence the baby's been thrown out with bathwater. But the point is, if you ask what are real solutions, public housing in its day was a real solution. Section 8 subsidies for tenants to go rent a unit is not a real solution. It's not a real solution because there aren't Section 8 vouchers to be had. People get on waiting lists of 30 years to get a voucher. So it's a technical, theoretical thing that doesn't really help. So what helps? What helps is LIHTC. And the state of California did a good thing. They funded additional LIHTC. They put another $500 million of state money into LIHTC. Yeah.
She's asking what is LIHTC.
So sorry. That really, my bad. I appreciate you stopping me. LIHTC is an acronym for the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. And the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit is a U.S. government budget line item allocated to states consistent with their population that gives so many cents on the dollar per human being in that state that the state can allocate out in two different formulas whereby, again, the money is used to give tax credits to developers that put money into affordable housing projects. Now, the money that they put into affordable housing projects is equity. So think of equity as kind of the down payment or something like that. So the larger the equity share of the funding of the affordable housing project, the lower the debt. The lower the debt, the lower the debt service. The lower the debt's the mortgage. So the lower the mortgage, lower the debt service on the mortgage. The lower the cash that needs to be collected by the owner of that affordable housing on a monthly basis. So, and that means that rents can be lower. And so corporations put money into specific developments. That money is very meaningful to getting those developments built. They get tax credits in return. And the stipulation on that money is that so many units of those developments have to be very low income, et cetera. So you create a building where for 30 years, the rents have to be below market. You create housing for affordability constrained population, and you do it through federal government allocation of the states of funding to provide tax credits.
Yes.
To follow along, it sounds as if a multi-income structure is more likely to be built because
So,
the
right.
return on the.
So what you're asking is does multi-income, which you had talked earlier about multi-income versus entirely affordable housing, that while multi-income is incremental, tends to be a better incentive. Is that part of what you're saying there? Or is this that you're likely to see more multi-income than just affordable housing because there's more ways to spread out the revenue collection?
Right. So let me say it this way. Again, take Culver City. Culver City is so successful. It's so well located. It is just kind of off the charts in so many dimensions that in a way it's a victim of its own success. And so the demand for a residential location in Culver City, be it because of the schools, be it because of access to employment, be it because of the location in Culver City, be it because of the transportation infrastructure in Culver City, whatever. Demand for all of the elements of Culver City that have been cleverly crafted over an extended period of time, the demand is sufficient as to push up prices and to make the likelihood that a developer coming in here and paying the land costs required for that piece of asphalt to scrape, to put on affordable units, just in a market rate context without any public subsidy, the likelihood that that deal can be economically feasible, in other words, pencil, is very low. Because of that, how do you get the affordable housing in Culver City? And here you spoke exactly correctly. You get it either through use of LIHTC type funds, where you're going to get corporations that are getting tax credits to put big chunks of equity into the project, again, so as to lower the debt. And with the lower debt, this lower debt service, rents can be lower, and there's a requirement of affordable units that comes with a LIHTC program, or through, as you say, what we call mixed income housing, where the developer can go to the private market, get private market debt, et cetera. Most of the units will be market rate, and some portion, 10%, whatever, limited percentage of the units will be below market, and there'll be some deal concocted to help the developer in that
Let me
respect.
build on that, also ask, sometimes people advocate, there's discussions around workforce housing and public-private partnerships as other ways to try to, to make an impact. Do you view those as material solutions, and what do you think their role is in this?
So public-private partnerships, that's a really big umbrella. But I was sitting today this afternoon reviewing research proposals from around UCLA to be funded through the research fund that we come out of my center at UCLA, which is called the UCLA Ziman Center for Real Estate. One of the proposals came from a good friend of mine in the School of Architecture, and she wants to create a catalog of all available community college sites that could be developed into affordable housing across the state of California. As community colleges, just like CSU, just like many, even just local schools, have fairly extensive land holdings. A lot of it's underutilized. And community colleges service a population of students that, we have students at UCLA that live in their cars, and not a few of them. And many more at the community college level. So this simple idea of cataloging land such that deals can be done where the community colleges control this land. The land doesn't have to be acquired at a market rate. And with the land costs under control, the actual development costs are not excessive and can be handled in a way that, again, there's a mechanism for recouping those expenses through a long stream of cash flows that relate to rents. And you give shelter to some community college students. So that's one example of a public-private partnership where the private developer could be brought in to develop student housing on community college sites.
Sure.
But all of that stuff needs to be brought forward.
Okay.
City of LA has an unknown catalog of sites that are underutilized that could be utilized. But I have to point out one thing here, and it comes under I alluded to it earlier, it comes under the heading of environmental justice. You know, if those City of LA sites are 5 feet from the junction of the 405 and the 101 in the most polluted place in the continental United States, you don't want to build housing for anyone, let alone kids, in those sorts of areas. So you gotta exercise some care.
Do we want to have any other further discussion on the role of local approval processes in I know we talked a little bit about that earlier before we jump into some of the policy recommendations.
Let's just jump. I think we talked about it.
So, you know, what can be done to address housing affordability? I know we talked about homelessness earlier, so I think we've covered that. But, you know, what can we do? What can be done to address this problem?
So, there's a lot of difficulties and not much happy news here. One of the things that we have to recognize is just like Culver City is an island in the sea of Los Angeles County, LA is, as I said at the very beginning, is just one node in the continental United States. The economic processes are going to be part of what's going to happen with this problem because, hey, if I can move to the Inland Empire, or if I can move to Tucson, or if I can move to Reno and get 3 times a house for a quarter of the price or whatever, those incentives are powerful. And so we don't see these kind of middle-class jobs coming to LA, and I doubt that we're going to see those jobs come to LA. And if you take the real housing-adjusted wage of a service worker in LA and compare it with Atlanta or Dallas or somewhere where this process will continue. But, okay, so now, what do? Well, you know, I think we do everything that we're trying to do, everything that we've talked about, every public-private partnership, every low housing tax credit, and every possible way that we can think of to, again, get the private sector into the act. And not because we can't do it without the private sector. So that means mixed income housing. It means also subsidies, as you were mentioning, Andrew, for workforce housing, so that, you know, the city of Beverly Hills wants, you know, nurses and firefighters and police and you name it, hanging out in the city of Beverly Hills, where there's got to be some provision for housing costs for these populations. So you pick the problem apart however we can, recognizing, I think, that we're just going to do what we can do and in the most humane way we can. And this isn't, there's no light switch here. You know, it's just terribly challenging. That was a horrible answer, right?
Well, that was it just shows how big the challenge is, but it also means that, as you said, it's got to be a variety of tools. There isn't one thing. The city, you know, the city can't, any city doesn't have enough money to create it on its own, but they can do little pieces with it, and that combined with a larger incentivization project. I think you talked a little bit about approvals processes as a way, for instance, of incentivizing more private investment as well. So
let me say the following. One of the things we did, this approvals report that we did for the city of LA, is we did a survey of developers, and we came across this kind of factoid that major developers of housing, some real household names that I'll whisper to you afterwards if you want, are not willing to build in the city of LA because of the nature of the approvals process, which is not only this time frame that I described earlier, but there's huge uncertainty in the process as well. And if you're a developer and you're trying to put together a spreadsheet, which is called a pro forma on development, and you have to account for the timeframes and the uncertainty, this all adds up into tremendous cost to the point where developers just say, you know what, I don't need to do business with the city of LA. I'll go to Culver City. I'll go to Orange County. I'll go north of LA. I'll go east of LA. I just don't want to have anything to do with LA. So the lesson here for LA is that LA is become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And I think the lesson here for Culver City is that, first of all, I don't know anything about this in Culver City. Second of all, the nothing that I know tells me that the same problems do not exist in Culver City, and maybe I'm wrong. And the third thing I would say is that it's very important that the city view itself and construct its policies in a way that present the city as part of the solution.
And that's, I think,
rather than part of the problem.
Many cities have, slow approval processes. I know that the city is reviewing its use fees right now as part of its, as a part of an overall reexamination. But anything that can be done to ease the process, lower the cost around and the fees around affordable housing is going to be a good thing. But I think the other question, densification has been a big discussion recently. And I think, on one hand, we want to maintain the character of our communities, and it's what makes Culver City special. But, are there ways in which you can create, transit-oriented communities and add to densification without majorly creating a negative impact in terms of the character of a community? I can think of two examples. Redondo Beach has a large number of condominiums, but it still managed to maintain a much more suburban character like Culver City has compared to, let's say, West Hollywood, which is one of the most dense cities that we have in Los Angeles, and you feel that denseness at times.
Yeah, so that's a very hard question, but I'll say two things. One of the things that I believe Culver City's been doing in recent years is to create a very tight spatial nexus between job creation and some of the major firms that have come in and housing within direct proximity of those jobs. I'm not sure if I'm entirely correct here or not, but that is, if you just take out a piece of paper, what do you want in Culver City? Well, if what you want in Culver City is to retain a high level of amenities as you define them, and at the same time allow for economic growth, development, more amenities, and what you consider to be kind of value-driven public policy, how do you get all of that at once? And so there are, I think the city's experimented with traffic-related issues that are really interesting. I know that school issues have been big in Culver City, but my 2 cents worth is that if you have a school district which is renowned in the metropolitan area as a high-quality school district, you protect it. You do everything you can to retain the quality of that school district, because that school district is intrinsically highly valued. And besides from being intrinsically highly valued, is part of the reason that property values are high in Culver City. It's part of the reason that you've all accrued equity in the homes that you own in Culver City. And it's part of the reason that good things happen in Culver City and good people live in Culver City and all the rest. So school district as an amenity has to be protected. But another thing here, and Andrew, you talked about this in terms of densification. And Jesse talked to me a little bit about this as well.
And before, because you haven't mentioned who Jesse is here in all of this, you and I know, but
I have a son by the name of Jesse, but I'm not referring to him right now. I'm referring to Jesse Mays.
okay, we want to make sure which Jesse you're referring to here,
No,
right?
no, no.
Okay.
No.
All right, so Jesse,
Talking about
all right, good.
Jesse,
Okay.
who's right here. You're a deputy city manager. You're highly esteemed, incredibly competent deputy assistant manager
The Jesse who is present with us today.
who should be protected at all
Yes.
costs. Give the guy a raise. So the thing of it is that my understanding is you have an 8-story height limitation here in Culver City, and you have a wonderful variety of very high structures being built across the street from this 8-story height limitation on the borders of Culver City. And so you say, well, what's that about? And well, what I think it's about is proximity to Culver City amenities is highly valued by those who are developing these more than 8-story, did I say that right? 57 feet buildings.
57-foot tall building.
Yeah. And these buildings that are being constructed are basically free riders on the public policy that's going on in the city. So if I were a resident of Culver City, I'd ask myself, why can't we do taller buildings in a way that preserves our amenity values and our amenity aspirations? So if you get down to the nitty-gritty, you ask, well, what are those amenity values and amenity aspirations? What are you really trying to create here? Are you trying to create, some people, Mayberry? Are you trying to create, an environment which is less densified or open? Or you're trying to create low crime? You're trying to create whatever the set of amenities are. Can you do that and retain that and enhance that in a way that allows for taller buildings, or some taller buildings?
Well, and if you
just finish, because if you can, then you can maximize those land values. You can get more housing units in. More of those units can be affordable, and you can accomplish some of your other goals.
And that's the, I mean, if you look at, you go on Washington Boulevard, which is part of Culver City, the LA side, you have taller, you can tell which the LA side is because they have the taller apartment buildings compared to the Culver City side.
Yeah. So I'm a little worried about this height limitation in Culver City because I'm worried that Culver City is creating amenities, you're being taken advantage of, and you're not getting the benefit out of the land and the development that you could be getting if you allowed for taller buildings. And again, I argue for taller buildings with the stipulation that you put a lot of thought into how to preserve the amenities at the same time that you create the density. And that's not rocket science, because that's happening all over the world and all over the country, where you put in tall buildings, but you create garden spaces, you create outdoor spaces, you create playgrounds, you create whatever you're interested in creating to maximize the quality of life at the same time that you're extracting the most you can out of the property value and the revenue flows and the affordability opportunities that pertain there too.
And do you want to talk a little bit about ADUs as well? I know that's been something that's been discussed quite a bit.
Well, what my understanding is that you all in Culver City, based on some controversy about single-family character of neighborhoods, are now governed by a Senate bill, a state Senate bill. Is it 9?
Yep,
Is that the
SB
number?
9.
That allows anyone with a single-family lot to, at maximum, divide that lot into 4 units, et cetera. So that seems to be the law. I don't know how much more I can say about it than that. I don't think that law is going away, but I'm not here to argue against single-family neighborhoods. Yeah, I do think that there are opportunities in single-family neighborhoods through appropriate subdivision or ADU or whatever to, create a bit more density in those neighborhoods.
But there's a discussion about whether the local utility. We're DWP for water, but we have our own. We're SoCal Edison for power. How do those approval processes play into building affordable housing?
Well, DWP turned out to be an offender in the data analysis that we did, in the sense that we found that there were egregious timeframes related to water and electrical hookup in the city of LA that added, vastly to the uncertainty and the timeframe of development. And the city's had conversation with DWP. We've had conversations with leadership at DWP. DWP is determined and has already put policy down to do everything as best as they can and to rectify any of these delays. But the only heads up there for Culver City, since you all are under contract with Southern California Edison, is to make sure that there aren't irregularities there that are creating unnecessary discomfort.
Sure. So I think that brings us back. I think that you had also talked a little about encouraging more LIHTC funding and also practices around homelessness. So I think we've gone through most of the issues. I don't know if there's anything you want to mention in conclusion as we are coming down to the end of our scheduled time as well. But I think a lot of folks have gotten a lot out of it and found this educational, not only the people here in the room, but the many people who are watching as well, who through our streaming, and hopefully I think we're going to put this online as well so that others can learn and get as much out of it as I know we all did here today. And I saw a couple of other council members and former council members come in a little bit earlier as well who wanted to learn more. So we appreciate that. And do you have any closing thoughts on what we can do better in Culver City and how we can set the stage better? And then we can go to if there are any remaining questions.
We do what we can. Again, the idea that Culver City is an island, there's so much that Culver City doesn't control. The land costs are a function of market activity. They're a function of success. These are all just realities that we have to contend with. But to be, just open the toolbox and use whatever tools you can, the variety of tools. These are important activities and, of course, have a humanitarian dimension as well that's really, really serious and important in today's world. I would just say as well that UCLA is basically owned by the people of California. It's a public university. Its mission is to engage and to contribute in every possible sense of the word. And I would urge you to avail yourselves to the resources of UCLA and also to the unit that I run, the UCLA Ziman Center for Real Estate, if we can be helpful to you in any way as you're working through any of this. And thank you.
Well, thank you. Let's close, unless there's any other questions. Go ahead. It's not like a television show where we're going to run out of X time and we have the next show afterwards. So
I've lived here since '94. We bought right after the Northridge earthquake. Yes. I don't want the city to radically change because I happen to like the ability to here, which I did. But how do I talk to people about the possibility of revisiting the height limit? Because it's 57 feet for what do you suggest that I say to people, that the reality is that we have to keep our amenities, we can't keep our police and our fire if we don't densify?
I'd say a couple of things. Point number one, LA is eating your lunch. Okay? Because LA is enjoying all the amenities that you've worked so hard to create and not having any, they have no height limitation and they're across the street and you live in a town that's very small with open borders. Second thing is that you as a city are leaving money on the table because you could maximize the value of those sites if there was not this height limitation, and you could put in units that would create revenue flows for the city, as well as opportunities for the city to meet its regional housing needs goals and all sorts of other things, and in a way that most people find to be easier to digest, where some percentage of the units are viewed as lower income or affordable. And number three, the alleviation of height limits doesn't mean all the amenities that you love and you've cherished are going into the trash can. In other words, you can have both if you do it carefully and intentionally. And that's what Jesse May's job is. So figure out how to get both, because you're going to have more revenue, and with more revenue, you can have more parks. You can put it into the schools. You can do, you can do whatever you want with it in a way that is consistent with the amenities that you cherish. And it doesn't mean that you have to turn Culver City into a city of shadows like Midtown Manhattan, where every structure is a skyscraper. That's not what we're talking about, but it can be done judiciously. And again, in a way that's amenity preserving and amenity enhancing. It's not an either or thing.
And there are ways that you can focus it in particular neighborhoods as well. I think there's been some discussion, particularly in some areas, where you can even allow people to trade back and forth if they've got space. I mean, some cities use air rights as another mechanism to be able to.
Yeah. Okay, I've said enough.
Okay.
So playing off of Janie's question, there's the whole livable cities movement, housing above it, near transit. Have you seen any community in the LA area that in a structured way?
I'm not sure if I can say yes as an answer to that question, but what I can say is that that's a model that's being widely adopted across the board. People see a lot of sensibility in that model, and you just drive down any corridor and you're going to see a lot of examples of that model of retail on the ground floor, some residential above it, connectivity to transit, et cetera. So personally, I think it's a great model, and it brings people onto the streets, it makes the city more walkable, et cetera, and by all means should be pursued.
And Daryl, I guess you'll get the last question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I usually put things in terms of materiality or saliency. So in other words, I would not break a lot of brain cells and spend a lot of hours on a tool that's going to drive you a very small distance down the road. Think about tools that are going to scale and really bring meaningful goal achievement to what you're trying to get at. And so that's where being open to developers who want to use LIHTC, being encouraging, being efficient, as well as trying to create, I'm sure you have a plan to achieve your arena goals, and I'm sure that that plan includes developers that are going to do mixed-use housing, mixed-income housing, and the more the better. I think that's a very good plan.
So, do you have one last question, or? All right, let's do that afterwards. But since we're wrapping down here, I want to point out and thank. I've seen a number. I saw a council member McMorrin and Puza come in. I saw Councilman Erickson here as well. So thank you all for coming. We really want to extend our thanks to the wonderful and amazing staff we have here at Culver City who made this event possible. Jesse Mays. For finding our incredible speaker. I hope you gave him a good grade to the class too.
He just broke the entire scale. I mean, he was just so far above everybody.
Yes.
So let's thank everybody. And I hope I have your lesson. Is it Alvarez? Yeah. Edgar Varela, I'm sorry, Edgar. I'm going to get names right one of these days. But also Edgar, who did an amazing job with all of the AV here and trying to make us all look good when you're like me and you have a face for radio. You need all the help you can get. But I think hopefully we can do more of these in the future. And I want to thank everybody here for coming and the great questions that were asked. And we look forward to hopefully doing this again soon. So everyone have a great night, and we appreciate you. Thank you.